I was tightening the final bolt on my new security gate when tires screeched across gravel, shattering the calm. A battered white SUV tore toward me, throwing up a cloud of dust that stung my eyes. Out jumped Sandra, hiking boots, neon leggings, and a bulging fanny pack, looking like she was geared for battle. She stormed the gate, red-faced and panting like I'd set fire to her house. Before I could say anything, she pushed her phone in my face, shaking hands and shouted, "You're being taped! You're illegally obstructing a historic trail." Her voice broke, half mad, half ridiculous. There I stood, wrench in my hand, boots planted firmly in the ground, trying not to giggle as she yelled into her phone, "911! I'm reporting a man holding people hostage on a public trail." Ridiculous? Guaranteed. But the ridiculousness didn't remain funny for long. Within minutes, sheriff cruisers sped down the road, lights flashing, sirens blaring. Sandra flailed her arms like she was landing a plane. This was not going to be a quiet Saturday anymore. The deputies had barely removed their seatbelts when Sandra came running over, arms waving like a windmill. "He's obstructing the historic trail," she screamed, pointing at my gate. "There are people stranded out there. No water, no food. He's a menace." Her tale was so exaggerated, the younger deputy narrowed his eyes as if deciphering hieroglyphics. I walked up, wiping my hands on a rag, and gestured to the 6 vivid private property signs nailed to the fence. The older deputy, Grimes, stared at me for a long time, then turned to Sandra. "Ma'am, may I see where this public path is?" he asked softly, as if deactivating a bomb. Sandra puffed up and marched over to the gate. In a scene from a bad slapstick comedy, she grasped the lock, pulled with all her might, slipped, and fell flat on her back in the ground. One sandal sailing. Time stood still. She struggled in a bush as the young deputy choked to suppress a laugh. Sandra stood up, barefoot, unflappable. She began to rant about people's land, saying her great-aunt's neighbor's dog walker trekked here back in the 70s. I simply blinked, stunned at her mental contortions. The deputies demanded evidence. I took a folder from my truck. Deeds, county documents, survey reports, certified, notarized, laminated. I'd learned never to underrate individuals like Sandra. Grimes read through the papers, turned to her and said, "This is private property. There is no public trail here. You'll have to go." Her face went eggplant purple. Steam practically whistled out of her ears. "I'll have your badge," she shrieked. "I know the mayor." Grimes shrugged. "Unless the mayor rewrites property law, you're trespassing." Sandra changed strategy. She started taking photos of my gate, of my truck, even the deputies, complaining about the historical society and the press. She marched back to her SUV, slammed the door, and speeded away, leaving a cloud of dust and one sole sandal. I thought that would be the end of it, but my instincts told me otherwise. Sandra wasn't the kind of person to beat a retreat. She was a double-downer. Sure enough, by nightfall, town was covered in flyers. "Save our trail," they shouted, featuring a photoshopped picture of me as a cartoon villain. The accusations? That I was jailing hikers, destroying heritage, stealing public land. Ridiculous. Except Sandra was dead earnest. I sat on my porch, sweet tea in hand, watching the sunset. That gate? It was my line in the sand. Sandra had declared war. What she didn't know was how airtight my documents were. Every paper bulletproof. She also didn't know my security cams caught her 911 call and her dramatic fall. By Monday, her weekend scheming had flowered. Neon posters were duct taped everywhere. My mailbox, fence posts, even the gas station bulletin board. One featured a low-angle photo of my gate at sunset, attempting to make it look sinister. But worse, there were drone shots of my property taken surreptitiously. I removed one flyer from my windshield, shaking my head. Clip art and fiction could shake me up, Sandra? She was in for an education. That evening, screams echoed from my backyard. I walked on over with my phone at the ready. There was Sandra again, with a motley crew of teenagers, some fellow carrying a megaphone yelling craziness, balloons attached to my fence, signs all over. A petition table creaked in the breeze. She saw me and shouted, "There he is," as if she had caught a fugitive. The mob half-heartedly raised fists. I rested against a column, waiting. She waved a clipboard. "We want you to reopen the trail." I requested evidence it was open to the public. She stumbled, then began spouting gibberish about common law access and historical tradition, using invented legal jargon. I asked if she had support from a lawyer or the city. She spewed out nebulous claims about city hall connections. I nodded, pretending to be impressed, then said, "Unless—" Sandra opened her mouth like a fish. Her entourage grumbled, sensing the change. The brighter ones dropped their placards and disappeared. Sandra collapsed, screaming about suing me, the governor, even the Supreme Court. I left whistling. The next morning, most posters were vanished. I thought perhaps she'd given up. Wrong once more. A few days later, there was honking and chanting outside. Sandra had come back with 20 protesters, free the path signs, lawn chairs, even a guy barbecuing hot dogs like a tailgate. She took out a megaphone. "This man holds our community hostage." She thrust it at me. "What do you say, oppressor?" I recorded. "Smile, Sandra." An hour later, I phoned the sheriff. The dispatcher sighed. Sandra's tricks were legendary. Deputies arrived, surveyed the circus, and told her two things: disperse or be charged. Her crew, sunburned and bored, came to their senses. They struck camp, leaving Sandra alone, kicking a cooler in anger. The trail remained silent. But Sandra, she was still scheming. That much I knew. Then one night, my security system beeped. I checked the feed. Jaw clenched. Sandra and two friends, flashlights and bolt cutters in hand, sneaking around my back gate. They whispered, awkward as Looney Tunes burglars. Sandra snipped the chain. The instant it broke, floodlights flashed on, sirens shrieked, and my speaker declared, "You are being recorded." "Police on the way." Sandra shrieked, losing the cutters. One man stumbled over thorns. The other used his flashlight to blind himself. I drank a soda, observing the commotion. Patrol cars rolled quickly up. Deputies leaped out, guns held. Sandra bawled of saving the trail. Her friends ratted her out on the spot. She screamed of rights and amendments, none applying. She was cuffed and still screaming. So were her cohorts, who were suddenly and tightly mouthed. At the station, she demanded to speak with the chief, the mayor, the governor, hailing herself a hero. Deputies just booked her. Trespassing, vandalism, tampering. Her crew bailed out fast. She seethed. By morning, town was abuzz. Diners chuckled about the trail rescue. Memes emerged. Sandra as bolt cutter bandit. I remained quiet. My attorney did his job, filing charges for damages to property, defamation, and obtaining a restraining order. Sandra gave a pathetic press conference, raving to snoozing reporters. In the meantime, a deputy waved my deed. Footage of her arrest, not her tirade, was seen on television. The city denied her request to demolish my gate, admonishing her for frivolous lawsuits. I hung their letter beside my deed. Sandra's universe collapsed. Historical groups abandoned her. Stores overlooked her. Her few supporters wandered away. I installed cameras, fortified the fence, and at last had some peace. Court day arrived. I got there on time and calm. Sandra burst in late, muddy boots, a rumpled blouse, and a frayed folder. Her supporters? Scarcely a handful. The judge, all business, demanded proof. My attorney produced deeds, video, records, aerial photos. Sandra presented an emotional argument for heritage. No documents, just grainy photographs. The judge questioned her. She stumbled. My attorney asked for damages, attorney fees, a permanent restraining order. Sandra protested, rambling on about freedom. The judge was irate, snapping, "Trespassing isn't a civil right." Verdict: heavy fines, full restitution, 500-foot restraining order, and 30 days to retract all lies. Sandra stood immobilized, fists clenched as her few supporters ran away. Outside, she cried to cameras about injustice. I remained silent, simply drove my truck away. Headlines buried her. Landowner vindicated. Trail lies debunked. Her meltdown footage went viral. She became a joke, excluded from groups, ghosted by businesses. Eventually, she relocated. I put an iron sign on my gate. Private trail, safeguarded by law and reason. Intruders streamed for entertainment. It became a landmark in our town. Tourists took photos. Neighbors asked me to barbecues. My trail was quiet, guarded once more. As I sat on my porch one evening drinking coffee, I watched the sunset color the hills. Sandra had attempted to take my peace. She lost everything: my property, my gate, my serenity, still standing, such as the truth, such a good gate, unmoving.